Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyanam Gunanavasya Bande Gorashi Charanaravrindam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurunanavasya Bande Gorashi Charanaravrindam Bande Gorashi Charanaravrindam Bande Gorashi Charanaravrindam Charanaravrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Bande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Bande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Diramajanado Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatapi Bande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatapi Bande Gurashi Chaturbidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Sratana Triptam Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturbidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Sratana Triptam Kritaiva Triptim Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shiradhikama Gavayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shiradhikama Gavayara Para Madhura Lila Pratikchanasa Dhanalalupasya Bande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Pratikchanasa Dhanalalupasya Nekunjayono Ratikalisidhyai Jayari Virjukti Apekshaneya Nikunjayona Ratikalisidhyai Tatrati Daksha Ativalavasya Bande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Sakshadhari Dena Shamasta Shri Rukta Tathava Vyataiva Sadhavi Sakshadhari Dena Shamasta Shri Rukta Tathava Kintu Prabhoja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Yam Stubam Tasa Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Yam Stubam Tasa Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Yam Stubam Tasa Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Yam Stubam Tasa Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Vachatari Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prabhupada Nirvishesha Shunavadi Vachatari Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Bol, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Yaraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Gopal Govindaram Shrimadusudam गिरिधारी गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare 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 Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jagannath, Subhadra, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Nitya Gora Haribo, 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 Nitya Gora Haribo, 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 Nitya Gora Premanandi, Haribo, Jai Vishwapara Paramahansa Prabhajaka Sutra Srati Simaj, Iskon Pratishta Vibhiti Samstapaka Chara Vaishnav Ceremony, Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prima Bhakti Patita Pavana. His Divine Grace, Abhay Charavrinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai, Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Namacharya Shri Hari Rasta Kuri Ji Ki Jai, Jai Ananta Kuri Vishnavindi Ki Jai, Prem Si Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai, Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Jai Pramanama Sankirtaneka Janaka Prema Purushottama, Shri Sachinanda Nishman Gauranga Shri Chaitra Mahaprabhu Gaura Hari, Mahavranaya Avatar Ki Jai, Golokera Pramadhan Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai, Yuga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai, Prihat Midanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopna Radha Kunda, Syama Kun Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathurudam Ki Jai, the Lordship Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai, Shri Maya Purnavadvip Eka Chakradam Ki Jai, Paramakaruna Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai, Shri Purushottam Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu, Shrimati Subhadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai, Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Karna Shingade Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Brindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Mati Radharani Ki Jai, Shamaveta Bhakta Brindi Ki Jai, Nitai Gaurari Pramanande Haribo. All glory to the Assembly Body. All glory to the Assembly Body. All glories to Sambhri Bodhis, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Guru.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Praglada Lada Dayine.
Pralada Dayine.
Hiranyakashipo Vakshaha.
Hiranyakashipo Vakshaha.
Shilantanka Nakalaye.
Jaya Shilantanka Nakalaye.
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Yato Yato Yamitato Narsimha.
Jaya Jato Jato Jamitato Narsimha.
Bahir Narsimha Hidaye Narsimha. Narasimha Madim Saranam Prapate.
Narasingha Madim Sharanam Prapade.
Tava Karakamalabare Nakam Abhuta Shimam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Tabakara Kamalavare
Nakam Abhuta Shimam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Jaya
Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev
Jaya Nisingade Jaya Nisingade Jaya Nisingade Jaya Nisingade
Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Jayo Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jai Shri Shri Bhakti Pada Sarva Vignashna Kanishingade भगवान की जय। जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। निताई गौरारी प्रेमानंदे हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महा
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
जो तुम्हारा चरणालो तारा वांछा पूर्ण हो
जे तुम्हारा शरण तारा वांछा पूर्ण
कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन
तुम्हें कृपा करे करतारे वृंदावन वासी
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो बा
मोराए विलास कुंज दियो बा
नायान हरि बो सदा जुग रूप राशि
अमिनायन सदा जुगाल रूप राशि
ये निवेदन द्वारा साकिरानुगाता कोरा
निवेदन सकीरनुगाता कर
सेवाधिकारा दिए करणी जदासी
सेवायाधिकार दिए करणी जदासी
दीना कृष्ण दासा हो ये नमोरा हो
दीना कृष्ण दासे कौन ये न मोरा
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदायन वासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदायन वासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवासी
नामो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नामो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
कानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च
तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति
प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कानि च तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
कानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कानि च तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कानि च तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
कानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कानि च तानि तानि प्राणास्यान्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पादे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulasi Maharani, Jaya Tulasi Maharani, Jaya Tulasi Maharani, Jaya Tulasi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Brinde Devi, Jaya Brinde Devi, Jaya Brinde Devi, Jaya Brinde Devi.
Jaya Brinde, Jaya Brinde, Jaya Brinde, Jaya Sri Brinde.
Nitya Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitya Gaura Haribo.
Nittai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nittai Gaura Haribo. Shri Brindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattavatai Namo Namaha. Shri Brindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Brindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattavatai Namo Namaha. Brindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure grove, Shri Vrindavana. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower who carry damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always sing in love Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpanamarjanam Bhavamada Bhagni Nirvapanam Shri Akari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Smartaram Param Jayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smarane Narana Pita Janmaneshwari Bhavatar Bhakti Raitu Kipari Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritama Visame Bhava Buddha Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja Sitaduri Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galavara Sudharaya Vadanam Gadagadarudaya Gira Pulakrani Chitamba Pukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakshusha Prabhusaitam Shunyaitam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virayena Asilishva Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshanar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Thava Vidadhatulam Patu Mat Pranatastu Saivana Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shekhastakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurateshe Namaha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can rain the old benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and stroll in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion from service birth to birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other I've fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if it handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Kyastakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahavaranayi Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Gaura Krishna There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting for Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which often Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy name and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jaivancha kalpatarubhyacha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Shri Guru Vandana Mangala Charan ki jai. Om Agyanaktimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Saparantikam Mandiham Shri Guru Shri Jutapara Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Viranto Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnavadi Patsatyari Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripavdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurjojvala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravane Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudhapo Siddhanta Dvantaharine Namagora Kishoraya Sakchavera Gyamurtaye Vipralambhara Sambodhe Paramujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchit Anandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumishvam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannataya Te Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha Panchatattamakam Krishna Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataro Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratopango Mama Mandamatir Gatir Masarvasya Padam Bhujo Radha
Madana Mohano Divyadvindaranya Kalpadramadaha Shrimad Ratnakara Simasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shriman Rasara Sarambivam Sivatatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanashwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiraja Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Masukalpa Riksha Laksha Ritesa Surabhira Vipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Karnanda Aravinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Pakoti Kamaniya Visesa Sobam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamalyavamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakela Kalavilasam Shaman Tribanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakilendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Manipungamana Sobhyasti Yad Prapadisim Yavichintya Tatve Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagaranda Kotim Yaschakti Rasti Jagaranda Chaya Yudanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Patibhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nichirupa Tayakalabi Goloka Eva Nivisata Kilatma Bhutto Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadeva Hidesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatista Nana Avataram Akarod Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Sambhavat Paramam Pamamyo Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagaranda Koti Koti Swaseswa Sudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagaranda Satani Sute Draigunya Tad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadva Vulambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasuya Praninam Pratifalam Smaritam Upetya Leelaya Tena Bhuvanani Jaya Jasam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nichitamni Tale Chatasya Devi Maheswari Dama Sute Sutesu Tete Prabhavini Jaya Vijasya Yena Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Sustista Te Pralaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Jayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichana Rupam Apya Chesta Tesa Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Naitata Pritakaste Hetu Yasambhutama Pitata Samapaitikar Yat Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Dipartsudev Hita Santaram Abhyupetya Dipayate Vivita Hita Samanu Dharma Yastadri Geva Hicha Vishnu Tayavi Bhati Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narlava Jale Barjitmoga Nidramananta Jagaranda Saroma Kupa Adhara Saktam Avalam Param Swamurtim Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamatavalamya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadandanata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalaviseso Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalesha Nijesu Teja Swayam Kiyat Prakatayata Pitadvatatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinadaya Kumbha Dwande Pranama Samaye Saganadi Raja Vignan Vihanta Malamas Jagatrayasya Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamabu Maruti Sasya Kalasta Tatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahana Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmota Papa Nichaya Sutayasta Pamsi Brahmadi Kita Patagava Yasya Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopamatavendra Mahosva Karma Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nita Tiktik Jubal Aptipuajam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Saja Pranayadi Bitti Vatsalya Moho Gurugoro Vasavya Baba Sanchintya Tasya Sadvisintanamapurete Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiyakanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Jumabu Mischintamani Ganama Itoyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivasai Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Puram Apitata Swadyam Apichasa Yatra Shiradi Vishravadi Shirabi Vyasta Suma Nime Sardakyava Vajitina Hiratra Pisamaya Bhajay Svita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golakam Itiyam Vidanta Ste Santak Shiti Virat Sharak Katipaya Shri Guru Astika prayers, Gijay. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. From my respectful basis unto lotus feet is such a spiritual master, who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always glad by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. From my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such a spiritual master. Spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. From my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such a spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. From my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. From my respectful basis unto the lotus feet is such spiritual master. Spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting gopis who at different times made different tastes or arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. From my most humble basis unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. Spiritual master to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord, because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful basis unto the lotus feet as such spiritual master, as a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always offer a respectful basis unto the lotus feet as such spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I should offer my respectful basis unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, Text number 20. Stigna Samita Valokena Vacha Piyusa Kalpaya Charitrinana Vadenya Shinikitena Chatmana. Snigdha, gentle. Smita Avalokena, by a glance with a sweet smile. Vacha, by words. Piyusha Kalpaya, compared to nectar. Charitrena, by character. Anavadyena, without flaw. Shri, fortune. Niketana, residence. Cha, and Atmana, by his transcendental body. Translation by his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Purport by his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the previous verse, it is described that Lord Krishna, being situated in the truths of Sankhya philosophy, is detached from all kinds of matter. In the present verse, it is described that he is the residence of the goddess of fortune. These two things are not at all contradictory. Lord Krishna is detached from the variegatedness of the inferior nature, but he is in eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature, or his internal potency. One who has a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand this distinction between the external and internal potencies. In Bhagavad Gita, the internal potency is described as para prakriti. In the Vishnu Purana also, the internal potency of Vishnu is described as para shakti. The Lord is never detached from the association of para shakti. This para shakti and her manifestations are described in the Brahma Samhita, 5th chapter, 37th verse. Avitabhis. The Lord is eternally joyful and cognizant in this taste derived from such transcendental bliss. Negation of the variegatedness of the inferior energy does not necessitate negation of the positive transcendental bliss of the spiritual world. Therefore, the Lord's gentleness, his smile, his character, and everything related to him are all transcendental. Such manifestations of the internal potency are the reality of which the material shadow is only a temporary representation from which everyone with proper knowledge must be detached. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Srila Prabhupada, Gaura Premanandi Haribol. So this verse is giving us many hints about the difference between the external potency of Krishna and the internal potency of Krishna. The internal potency of Krishna is called Para Prakriti, and the external potency is called Apara Prakriti. So there's a world of difference between the two. To understand that requires a lot of hearing. And what? Hearing from bona fide devotees about who is Krishna and what are his unique qualities. This is explained also in the dialectic spiritualism, and it says in this discussion between Hayagriva Das and Srila Prabhupada, and Hayagriva Das says, according to Socrates, the real pursuit of man is the search for the absolute good. Basically, Socrates is an impersonalist because he does not ultimately define this absolute good as a person, nor does he give it a personal name. And Prabhupada says, that is the preliminary stage of understanding the absolute, known as Brahman realization, realization of the impersonal feature. When one is further advanced, he attains Paramatma realization, realization of the localized feature, or Paramatma, whereby he realizes that God is everywhere. It is a fact that God is everywhere. But at the same time, God has his own abode. Goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhuta. Brahma Samhita 5:37. God is a person and he has his own abode and associates. Although he is in his abode, he is present everywhere, within every atom. Andantarasta paramanu chantarastam. This is Brahma Samhita 5th chapter 35th verse. Like other impersonalists, Socrates cannot understand how God, through his potency, can remain in his own abode and simultaneously be present in every atom. The material world is his expansion, his energy. This is Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter 4th verse. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 comprise my separated material energies. He can be present everywhere, although the energy and the energetic are non-different. We cannot say that they are distinct. They are simultaneously one and different. This is the perfect philosophy of Achintya Bheda Tattva. Devotee, Hayagriva says, the good of which Socrates speaks is different from Sattva Guna. In the Republic is a book by Plato, Socrates says that it is the good which gives truth to the objects of knowledge, and the very power of knowing to him who knows them. He speaks of the form of essential goodness as the cause of knowledge and truth. Although we may consider the good to be an object of knowledge, it would be better if we regarded it as being beyond truth and knowledge and of higher value. Both knowledge and truth are therefore to be regarded as like unto the good, but it is incorrect to identify either with the good. He believes that the good must hold a higher place of honor. Objects of knowledge derive their very being and reality from the good, which is beyond being itself and surpasses it in dignity and power. So in other words, when you hear the explanation of Socrates' understanding of the absolute truth, it's completely impersonal. And it even gets a little bit confusing. Because how do you attribute living properties to something that is not moving? You see. So the way he explains, the way Socrates explains the absolute truth is completely impersonal. However, now we're going to see a stark difference between the words of Socrates and that of Prabhupada. Prabhupada is always a personalist. And everything in the material world and the spiritual world is personal. So now he says, in response to what was just spoken, Sattva guna, the mode of goodness, is a position from which we can receive knowledge. Knowledge cannot be received from the platform of passion and ignorance. So we've repeated that many times. Here it is, Prabhupada himself saying it. Knowledge cannot be received from the platform of passion and ignorance. That's why most children today are taught to be in the modes of passion and ignorance. That's why very few of them come to class. Very few of them actually chant 16 rounds. And very few of them really understand Krishna consciousness. They don't understand it. Why? Because it requires great concentration of hearing to be able to understand. And most people do not have the inclination to hear from authority. They like to speculate. So here it says, if we hear about Krishna or God, we are gradually freed from the clutches of darkness and passion. Then we can come to the platform of Sattva guna, the platform of pure goodness. And when we are perfectly situated there, we are beyond the lower modes. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Nastapresu abhadresu nityam bhagavata seva. Bhagavati utamasloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. Tadarajas tamo bhavo kamalobadayasche chete tairanavitam stitvam sattve prasiddhati. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is practically destroyed. And loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. At the time loving service is established in the heart, the modes of passion, rajas, and ignorance, tamas, and lust and desire, kama, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes happy. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 1, 2, 18, and 19. So this is the truth. This is real understanding of the absolute truth. One must develop this desire to hear about Krishna. So yesterday I was preaching to someone at the end of the Sankirtan, when we were wrapping up. I met this couple. That's an Indian couple. And they looked very nice. They were very pious. And they were very pious. And I decided, let me speak to these people seriously. So I asked the boy, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to get he said either master's or PhD in urban something. In other words, organizing all the processes of living in a city. And I said, this is not knowledge. I said, knowledge is explained in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 to 12. And it gives 18 points of knowledge. And there's nothing about organization of urbanism in there. That would be considered ignorance. So he was a little bit taken aback because he's getting his PhD in it. But his wife agreed. She said, yeah, you're right. It's not really knowledge. Because what is the purpose of knowledge? It's to free us from the cycle of birth and death. So he will not get freed from the cycle of birth and death by getting a PhD in urbanism. So he didn't argue. He was a pious person. And then I explained that the real knowledge is understanding Krishna. If you understand Krishna, you know everything. Now, this is a debatable question because many people say, well, you won't know anything about differential calculus and you won't know anything about this thing and that thing. You won't know how to build a rocket. You won't know how to build a tunnel. Yeah, that's true. But those things are not the absolute truth. They are relative. Everything in the material world is relative to Krishna, who is the only absolute. So, learning relative things, meaning they do not last eternally. So, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, it says, a very important verse. Let me just find it very quickly. It says that Nasto vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sata, ubayor apidristo natas, tvanios tatvadarshibhi. That there is sat and asat. So what is sat? This is the 2nd chapter, 14th verse. 16th verse. It means sat is something that's eternally existing in all frames of reference and at all time, past, present, and future. That is the real subject of knowledge. Asat are temporary things, and they're relative. They don't exist eternally. So therefore, focusing all our attention on relative things means we'll be a failure as far as being liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So this is something that should be taught to our children. There's a difference between knowledge that is sat and knowledge. And in the purport to this verse, 2nd chapter, 16th verse, it says, well, first of all, the verse says, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, meaning the material body. Why? Because it doesn't last eternally. There is no endurance. And of the eternal, meaning the soul, there is no change. In other words, it's eternally existing. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Just like the verse today is about the difference between the external energy of the Lord, or apara prakriti, and the internal energy of the Lord, which is para prakriti. In the same way, there's a difference between knowledge, which is sat, and so-called knowledge, which is asat, or knowledge that's eternally true, and mundane knowledge, which is always relative, meaning it's not eternal. It remains for some time, then it disappears. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, there is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science, and thus growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. So we're seeing here, these are beautiful explanations. There's a difference between the external energy of Lord and the internal energy of Lord. There's a difference between what is eternal and what is temporary. And here it's saying there's a difference between matter and spirit. The spirit or the soul is eternal, and matter is only temporarily manifested. Although matter is eternal, but it goes through two stages of being manifest and unmanifest. So it points to, or it favors illusion, because you have something and then it disappears. You never see it again. So it bewilders people. Okay, so by nature, the body is ever-changing and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both impersonalists and personalists. In the Vishnu Purana 2.12.38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotimsi Vishnu Bhuvanani Vishnu. The words existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth. This is the beginning of the instruction of the Lord to the living entities, who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the reestablishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter, although there's no difference between the energy and the energetic. The energetic is accepted as the supreme, and energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. Now, this is extremely important, what he just said. Basically, he's saying that Krishna has this paraprakriti and aparaprakriti, or this superior spiritual energy and inferior spiritual energy. And if we want to understand who we are, we have to understand our relationship with Krishna. And those things that Krishna can do that we can never do, and those things that Krishna reveals to us once we become surrendered to him. So it's impossible to understand Krishna in the modes of passion and ignorance. But when we come to the mode of goodness and we develop this desire to hear regularly from bona fide devotees, at that point we begin to learn the science of Krishna. So it says that, and in other words, if you want to understand who you are, it's always going to require having a relationship with someone. You cannot understand who you are in a vacuum. Right? You can think, well, we see Rene Descartes. He's a very famous philosopher, French philosopher. So he tried to eliminate everything about himself that he had a doubt about. So he eliminated God because he had doubt. He had a doubt maybe God doesn't exist. And he eliminated everything. And there was only one thing he couldn't eliminate. And that was, I think, therefore I am. In other words, he couldn't stop thinking. And because he couldn't stop thinking, that's who he is. So once he found one thing that he could not deny, then he rebuilt his understanding of the universe based on that one thing. So that is a flawed process, because the one thing that we cannot deny is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we start from that one thing, we can understand the truth of the universe. If we start from, I think, therefore I exist, well, it's not false, it's a fact. But one is not understanding Krishna properly. One understands only through the prism of his own mind. So the spiritual knowledge is revealed to us. So when Brahma received knowledge from Krishna, it was revealed through his heart. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyantiya. So Krishna's in the heart as Paramatma, and he revealed it to Brahma. And he gave him a vision of the spiritual world. So the whole process of Socrates and modern education is about know thyself. But how do you know yourself? It's always in relationship to someone else or something else. So as long as one doesn't choose to know themselves in relationship with Krishna, they will never understand who they are and what is the purpose of life. So this is what children are not taught. And because of that, they try and understand who they are in relationship to mundane people and mundane concepts. And therefore, they're always confused, and they make many, many mistakes in life. See? So as long as we, adults, do not identify who we are in relationship to Krishna, but identify who we are in relationship to so many other things in the material world, we also will be subject to illusion and make many, many mistakes in our life. So this is the Vedic way of understanding the reality of existence. It's understanding our relationship with Krishna. Then we have a realistic point of view of life. So therefore it says, the living entities belonging to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter, although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. So we are the energy of the Lord, and he is the source of that energy, because our soul is eternally related to Krishna. It cannot be separated from him. We may forget about the relationship, but we're still dependent on Krishna. We cannot exist without him. How can we prove that? It's very easy. Every day we have nothing to do with the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. And no government is controlling it. Every day there are movements of the planets which are very precise. For example, the Earth is revolving on its axis at about 1,000 miles an hour. And the Earth is revolving also around the sun, and that's around 60,000 miles an hour. And at the same time, the sun and the whole galaxy, including all the planets, is revolving around a polar axis in the universe, and that is over 400,000 miles per hour. You feel any shaking? Look at all these very precise movements, and all the planets and all the stars, so-called, they're all moving in precise orbits. Who's doing all this? It's very precise and incredible at incredible speeds. Who has organized all this? Our whole life depends on this being not chaotic, but and it's predictable. Every day, they predict what time the sun will rise. You look on the internet right now. Sunrise time. It's there. All year round, they're predicting when it's going to rise, when it's going to set, and it's going to be different times, right? Now, how do they do that? Well, are they controlling it? No, but they know that there are precise movements, and the changes of seasons, all these things, and therefore they can predict it. So you see that?
Yeah, it is at the city. You can search based on the where you are also.
Yeah, also, yeah. It can be different times in different places. You see? So how is that happening? Right? Such precision? It's happening by Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not happening by the Americans. It's not happening by the Russians. Right? So, you see, proving God exists is not a difficult thing if you're an honest person and you begin to analyze what you're experiencing. We see that nature is predictable. Why? Because it's organized by a superior intelligence. That's why. And no one can emulate that. No one can put. Well, they can put a little Sputnik. You know how much the Sputnik weighed when the first Sputnik that was put into space? You know how much? 22 pounds. You know how long it lasted? It lasted a little bit more than 2 weeks, and then it crashed. You know how much it cost to put that into, and the Russians, how much they spent? By the way, first of all, you know how many people worked on that project? At least 10,000 to get that 22-pound Sputnik into the sky. Now, and you know how long they worked to do it? I think it was like 4 years. Just to put a 22-pound object into space, and to let it revolve around the Earth for about a little bit more than 2 or 3 weeks. You see, all that money, they spent at least several $100 million to do it. You know, if you count all the things they had to get together and the research and paying all those scientists and so forth. So we see whatever man does is puny, it's tiny, it's ridiculous in comparison to what God is doing. But do they accept and do they give credit to God? They take credit for putting a Sputnik into space, or the space station, right? It's been in space from, I think, maybe 15 years now, and then that's beginning to falter, so that'll crash, and then they'll have to do another one. So you see, these are, when they talk about exploration of space, it's a joke. They've hardly explored anything, and whatever they've done is insignificant compared to the planets and the stars and the sun and the moon. All these things are in precise orbits. We keep time by the precise movement of the planets. Therefore, every year they have to correct the time. You have to correct your watches, because our watches are incomplete measurements of time, and they correct it according to the movement of the Earth and the sun and so forth. So we see that this hubris is a nice word, look it up, Hubris. This hubris of the scientists and philosophers is an obstacle to understanding what the truth is. What's it mean?
Excessive pride or self-confidence.
That's it. They think they know better, but yet they admit that the universe is organized. It's functioning in an orderly way. Now, whenever something is organized and functioning in an orderly way, did it happen by accident? Did it happen by itself? No. Right? And the organization of the universe is billions of times more complicated than organization of, let's say, Microsoft or some company or some government or whatever. Billions of times more complicated. But yet it's precisely functioning. So, it says, the living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. So, we're all born with this ignorance, and instead of getting enlightened, we're sending our kids to these schools that just increase the ignorance. And basically, they don't achieve the purpose of life. Purpose of life in this planet is to purify ourselves and go back to Godhead, where we belong. If you do a research of our own kids, I mean, obviously, if you did research of the Karmi kids, none of them would, or very few of them would say, my goal is to go back to God. Right? What do you think?
Definitely.
Yeah. If you do a research of our kids, I tell you, I'll predict it right now. Hardly 1 out of 10 would say that, or 1 out of 20 or 30 would say that. Our own kids. Why? Because they have not been taught. The parents don't even understand what to teach their kids. They're forcing them to learn all this ignorance, you see. And that was my discussion yesterday with this couple. And I gave them homework. I didn't know who they were. I only met them for about 15, 20 minutes of discussion. I gave them homework, and they said, we're going to do your homework. And they were very nice, very educated, you know, and they were pious, you know. Otherwise, they wouldn't have listened for 20 minutes, you know, 20 minutes plus. And I was explaining, just like we're explaining things now, you know, and quoting verses and so forth to show that it was not based on speculation. And they listened, and they were very, very respectful. So that means that they're ready to be Krishna conscious, right? Because they were respectful, they were patient, and they listened very seriously. And I told them, next time I see you, I'm going to ask you questions to see if you did the homework. And they said, we're definitely going to do the homework. And they said, we're coming to the temple. They came to the temple 2 days ago, and then they saw us on Sankirtan. So we have to preach to people, but the truth. And if we can't start with our own kids, how are you going to do it with other people? You see, it's not going to happen. So it's very important to understand 2 verses that Prabhupada quotes. He says, Nasta presu abhadresu nityam bhagavati seva bhagavati tamasloke bhakti bhavati naistaki tadarajas tamo bhavo kamalovo dayaschaya chete etarinabhitam stitvam sattve prasidati. So, by regularly hearing the Bhagavatam and rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is practically destroyed, and loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. At the time loving service is established in the heart, the modes of passion, rajas, and ignorance, tamas, and lust and desire, kama, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes happy. Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 2nd Chapter, verses 18 and 19. This is a real knowledge. Regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees. Then you come into a relationship with Krishna, and Krishna is the absolute truth, and we are living in the world of relativity. We become liberated from that nonsense relativity and begin to understand who we actually are. We have an eternal soul, and we're eternally part and parcel of Krishna, which means what? It means that if we don't surrender to Krishna, we are being sinful, and we're going to suffer because of it. That's what it means. So this surrender to Krishna, or saranagati, is very important. It's the real pathway or segue to going back to Godhead. And this surrender to the Lord is not a one-time thing. Every day we have to decide, today I'm going to surrender to Krishna. We have to decide it every day because we can be deviated very easily. Okay. So, therefore Prabhupada says, This process may be gradual, but it is certain. The more we hear about Krishna, the more we become purified. Purification means freedom from the attacks of greed and passion. Whoa, what a fantastic definition. Purification means freedom from the attacks of greed and passion. Then we can become happy. From the Brahmabhuta platform, we can realize ourselves and then realize God. Realize ourselves and realize God. In other words, if you're going to try and understand who you are, it's going to have to be in relationship to someone else. So instead of realizing who you are in relationship with Karl Marx or Sigmund Freud or Darwin, it's better to choose Krishna. Then you can understand who you really are, you see. So everybody is trying to identify who they are in respect to some other person, because you can't figure out who you are just if you live in a vacuum just by yourself. You have to understand who you are in relationship to someone else. And the best person to understand who you are in relationship to is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then you'll really understand who you are. Anybody else, you'll get confused. Right? Okay, so then it says, the more we hear about Krishna, the more we become purified. Purification means freedom from the attacks of greed and passion. Then we can become happy. From the Brahmabhuta platform, we can realize ourselves and then realize God. So, before realizing the supreme good, we must first come to the platform of sattva guna, goodness. Therefore, we have regulations prohibiting illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. So these four things will destroy any effort to understand who we actually are and who is Krishna. Ultimately, we must transcend even the mode of goodness through bhakti. Then we become liberated, gradually develop love of God, and regain our original state. And then he quotes a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 10th chapter, 6th verse. Nirodho shyanusayanam atmana saha sakti bihi muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vivastiti. When the living entity, along with his conditional living tendency, merges with the mystic lying down of the Mahavishnu, it is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after giving up the changeable material gross and subtle bodies. This means giving up all material engagements and rendering full service to Krishna. Then we attain the state where Maya cannot touch us. So let's really focus on what he just said. He says, liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after giving up the changeable material, gross and subtle bodies. So we have two material bodies covering our soul right now. One is the gross body made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And the other is the subtle body made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. When a person dies, the subtle body does not die. It's the subtle body that carries the person to the next gross body. Right? If the gross body is purified by engagement in devotional service, and the subtle body, made up of mind and intelligence, is purified by regular hearing about Krishna, then we can be liberated. We become eligible for liberation. Is this being? Did you ever teach your kids this?
I'm trying, Maharaj.
Yeah, but I mean, most people don't even try. They don't even know if that's what we're supposed to teach. There are two bodies covering this our soul, and unless we purify the subtle body, it's going to carry us to our next material body. We will not be free. Just getting free of the material body is not enough. We have to get rid of the subtle body. That's where all the things we did and all the desires we have, that's where it's being stored. And unless that's purified, birth after birth, we will stay in the material world. So then it says, when the living entity, along with his conditional living tendency, merges with the mystic lying down of the Mahavishnu, it is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Well, all of us who remain attached to ideas in our subtle body, we will eventually be absorbed into the body of Mahavishnu and wait until Mahavishnu wants to create the material world again. And at that time, when there's the next creation, we all come out from being inside, let's say, Mahavishnu, and we again revive our original consciousness that we had at the moment of death, and again engage in all kinds of materialistic activities. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after giving up the changeable material gross and subtle bodies. So what is the real form of the living entity? It's to be the eternal servant of Krishna. And if you go back to Vaikuntha, you'll have 4 arms, like Vishnu. And if you go to Goloka, you'll have 2 arms, like Krishna. Then we attain the state where Maya cannot touch us. If we keep in touch with Krishna, Maya has no jurisdiction. Daivihi eso gunamayi, mama Maya duratya, mam evaye prapadyante, mayame tam tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So yesterday I explained to these two, to the husband and wife, that Daivi esa gunamai, mama maya duratya, mam evayet prapadyante, mayam itam tarantite. And I explained to the husband, you can get your PhD in urban development, but it will not liberate you from the cycle of birth and death. You have to get your degree in understanding your relationship with Krishna. And yesterday, there were a good number of devotees on Sankirtan, and they distributed about $120 of books and preached to people. And then I met this couple at the end when everything was over, and I preached to them, and they also gave some donation, and they promised that they would come to the temple or to the next Sankirtan. So they have this desire, this thirst to know more about Krishna. Can we instill that thirst in our own children? That's the question. That is the question. So then it says, Krishna says, this divine energy of mind consisting of the 3 modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So rather than surrendering to mundane concepts and mundane people, we should surrender to Krishna. Okay, so this is all very instructive because it puts into perspective what is essential to do as a human being. What is essential is we should become convinced that our salvation is through engaging always 24 hours a day in devotional service. That is the only panacea. Look that word up, Panacea. Panacea. You see it? Panacea. What's it mean?
Solution or remedy for all difficulties or diseases.
Yeah, it's the remedy, it's the solution, it's the pill. for all. So, what is that pill? It is devotional service under the tutelage of bona fide the gurus, Siksha and Diksha gurus, with the purpose of pleasing Krishna. In other words, if you do service but it's not pleasing to Krishna, you will get nowhere. But if you do service to please Krishna, then you'll get everywhere. You'll go back to Godhead. So, what time? Okay, yeah. Are there any questions? We'll stop right there.
Maharaj, just a comment on yesterday's Sankirtan.
Yeah.
So when we were giving a burrito and or the cookie, and after that when we were handing over the free food truck card, many people, they got excited about hearing. They wanted to hear about free food truck. Some people were asking where it goes and where we can see. They were excited about it. Like immediately, I can see like within no time, within few seconds, they got excited.
They took an interest.
Yes, yeah, they took interest about the free food truck.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't think there's any other free food truck on the West Coast. Or if there is, they're keeping it a secret. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Maharaj, one more question. Question is on when we are when we explain to people, why they will ask why Krishna, how to answer them, because they believe that okay, someone is there and they are actually controlling, but they if you say Krishna, they will start why you are telling Krishna.
Do you know what Krishna means? Do you know what Krishna means?
Yes, he's.
What's it mean?
Krishna is everywhere and
Well, yeah, but
all attractive.
now he has 6 opulences. All wealth, all beauty, all knowledge, all power and strength, all renunciation. And so do I get it? So wealth, power, beauty. I forgot beauty. So those are 6 absolute opulences that makes him unique. Now, other people have some of those in small quantity. Krishna has it completely. He is the wealthiest, the smartest, the most powerful, the most famous, and so forth. So that is the meaning of the word Krishna. He means he is the most attractive because he has these 6 opulences in full. No one else can emulate him or come close to him. So once you explain, they say, why Krishna? Well, that's because you will not find anyone as eminently qualified to reveal knowledge than Krishna, because he's the source of all knowledge. He says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivisto matak smriti jnanam apahanam cha. He said, I am in the heart of every living entity, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So there's no one like Krishna, and because he possesses these 6 opulences in full. So if you're going to go to learn from someone, isn't it wise to learn from the most intelligent person, the most beautiful person, the most, let's say, wealthiest person, the most powerful person, So Krishna, therefore, you have to explain like this. The 6 opulences of the Lord. Okay. Any other question? Just like if you want to learn to play basketball, so who should you go to learn how to play basketball? who would you go to? Would you go to the corner grocer or the, would you go, you have to go to a real basketball player, right? And the best are the NBA basketball players. So if you get one of them to teach you how to play basketball, you'll learn, right? You always want to go to the best teacher, isn't it? Or if you need a lawyer, you want to go to the best lawyer, right? You don't want a junk lawyer, right? So Krishna is the best person to go to find out who you actually are. Right. Okay, should we stop there? Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Bando Moi Savadana Mate
Mando Mui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bai E Bhava Toriya Jai
Janara Prasade Mai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Chitete Koriya Kya
Arana Kori Ho Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asha
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Ati Aise Uttamagati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarvata
Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dila je janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dila je janme janme Prabhu se
Divya gyan hruday prakashito
Vegyan Prakasito
Prema એમાં ભક્તિ જહા હોય તે અવિદ્યા વિનાશ જાતે.
એમાં ભક્તિ હોય તે અવિદ્યા વિનાશ જાતે.
વેદે ગાય જહા ચરિતો.
વેદે ગાય ચરિતો.
શ્રી ગુરુ કરુણા સિંધુ આદમ જનાર બંધુ.
ગુરુ કરુણા સિંધુ આદમ જનાર બંધુ.
તોકે નાથ તોકે જીવાના. હા હા પ્રભુ કરો દયા દેહો મોરે પાદ જાય.
હા પ્રભુ કોરા દયા દે મોરે પદચય.
એ બેજાસ કૌશિક ત્રિભુવાના.
એ બેયાસ સચી ભુવાના.
શ્રીલા પ્રભુપાદ પતિત પવના.
પ્રભુપાદ પતિત ભવના.
જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ.
જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ જય પ્રભુપદ.
નમઃ ઓમ વિષ્ણુપદાય કૃષ્ણ પૃષ્ઠાય ભૂતલે શ્રીમતે ભક્તિ વેદાંતા સ્વામી નિતિ નામિને.
વિષ્ણુપદાય કૃષ્ણ પૃષ્ઠાય ભૂતલે શ્રીમતે સ્વામી નામને.
નમઃ ઓમ વિષ્ણુપદાય કૃષ્ણ પૃષ્ઠાય ભૂતલે શ્રીમતે ભક્તિ વેદાંતા સ્વામી નિતિ નામિને.
વિષ્ણુપદાય નમસ્કાય ભૂતલે શ્રીમતે ભક્તિ વેદાંત સ્વામી નિતિ નામિને.
નમસ્તે સરસ્વતી દેવે ગૌરવાણી પ્રચારિણે નિર્વિશેષા શૂન્યવાદી પાશ્ચાત્ય દેશતારિણે.
નમસ્તે સરસ્વતી દેવે ગૌરવાણી પ્રચારિણે નિર્વિશેષ શૂન્યવાદી પાશ્ચાત્ય દેશતારિણે.
નમસ્તે સરસ્વતી દેવે ગૌરવાણી પ્રચારિણે નિર્વિશેષા શૂન્યવાદી પાશ્ચાત્ય દેશતારિણે.
દેવે ગૌરવાણી પ્રચારિણે નિર્વિશેષ શૂન્યવાદી પાશ્ચાત્ય દેશતારિણે.
જય શ્રી કૃષ્ણ ચૈતન્ય પ્રભુ નિત્યાનંદ શ્રી અદ્વૈત ગદાધર શ્રીવાસાદિ ગૌર ભક્ત Vrinda.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radhe Radha Shivasari Gaur
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Jai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parajagachara Astatara Satara Shishi Shimad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to Assembled Lord, all glories to Assembled Lord, all glories to Assembled Lord, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai.
The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet, Srila Prabhupada. Jai.
Nama Om Vishnu